So if I was super high, it wouldn't make a difference. So I had like a PE, physical education final. And in that class, I was with my friend, the friend that I told you about, and his friend was on methadone. So there's these little wafers back then. I think there were 40 milligram wafers or something of methadone. And I was like, let's snort some methadone this morning. So we got the methadones, crumbled them up. I snorted those, and I was on the top floor of the bleachers finishing up my PE final. And nothing really hit me until I stood up. So I stood up from my final and I was stumbling down. I fell down the bleacher stairs as I was going to hand in my final. Luckily, I got to blame that on, like, I'm on bleachers, falling happens. But my friends knew I was high and they came down and they helped me walk because I don't know how much methadone I had, but whatever amount of opiates in my system, I couldn't walk, and I needed to get to the bathroom, finish up my test.
This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
Hey everyone, I just want to welcome you to another episode of Rock Bottom with Ryan, and just want to let you know that this episode is once again brought to you by Sober Strong Apparel. Sober Strong Apparel isn't just lifestyle wear, it's battle gear. Heavyweight tees, hoodies, and gear for ones who draw a hard line. Clean, sober, no compromise. We rep sobriety like a badge of honor, and every piece you throw on says you're a part of the crew that doesn't back down. And every order fuels recovery with 10% donated to treatment facilities. Because we don't just talk about it, we stand on it. So check out SoberStrongApparel.com. Use code ROCKBOTTOM, all one word, capital letters, for 15% off. That's SoberStrongApparel.com, code ROCKBOTTOM for 15% off. Check it out. A lot of great gear. I love what this company stands for. Really quality apparel, very thick clothing, t-shirts, sweatshirts, good graphic tees, everything. So check it out. A lot of great options. SoberStrongApparel.com, code ROCKBOTTOM. Thank you for all your support. And don't forget, if you're new to listening to this or have been listening, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify to support the show. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Enjoy this episode. All right, welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom with Ryan. I'm here with my guest today, Christopher. Christopher, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. Having a good morning. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. Just really excited to have you on here today and be able to chat with you and hear a little bit more about your story. I know that you work with the Laguna Treatment Center and all that, so I definitely want to hear more about that. But as you know, this is a recovery podcast, so do you mind kind of giving me an idea of, say, if you used to drink or do drugs, what was your drink or drugs of choice? If you don't have a sober date, it doesn't sound like you do, but you do when it comes to drugs. So what is that? And then where are you from, and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I think my answer is probably just going to lead to even more questions, but that's what it's meant to be, right? My last time using drugs was around my 21st birthday. So I'm gonna age myself, but probably about 15 years ago. And the reason why that was my sober day, or my date that I stopped using drugs, it was the craziest weekend of my life. A whole bunch of things just went back to back to back and went really terrible all in a row on my birthday week. And one of them was me using bath salts on campus with a friend, having a really terrible trip. I got into a fight with a couple guys from another fraternity on campus. I started the fight with these guys, then eventually got arrested, got put on academic probation for the rest of my academic career. And then I pretty much got kicked out of my fraternity. There was all kinds of crazy stuff that I was doing, again, alongside that weekend. And I needed to pick a path, and it wasn't going to be continuing to be blackout drinking and getting arrested and doing bath salts. So that was my rock bottom, if you will. And I flipped it around. I haven't touched drugs since, which is pretty great.
That's awesome. So yeah, so let's go into maybe a little bit about your background before doing what you're doing now, because it sounds like you're doing a lot to really help people in addiction change their lives. But I want to know kind of what led into all of this. What was childhood like? What was your family dynamic? What was life like growing up being Chris?
Yeah, those are all great questions. When I was young, so I could start from a kiddo. I felt like what I had was a normal childhood, quote unquote normal. I was probably 4 years old when my parents divorced. My dad was cheating on my mom, and it felt a immense amount of guilt and shame about what he was doing. I heard stories from my family about what was happening at that time. I knew my dad was a really heavy drinker, would drink massive amounts of vodka before he went into work. He left me alone in the street when I was a kid, some neglect that was happening, and all kinds of crazy stuff on that side. And I ended up staying with my mom for a majority of my time. And when I was there, so my mom was an apartment manager. So I switched schools in Vegas about 13 times. I've been to 14 schools total. So I had a whole lot of school switches. And luckily, when it started out, I was in the same area. So in my elementary school, felt on top of the world. I had a good community of friends, a lot of people that I was close to. I was class president in fifth grade. It felt like nothing could go wrong. And then kind of like the story of Inside Out, I just changed direction and moved across the city. My mom got a job across the city at another apartment complex. So I moved over there. I didn't know anybody, and I was going through whatever someone would go through in that kind of transition. It was a packed school. There was about 3,400 kids. And when I was there and walking through the hallways, it was impossible not to bump into people, fights happening all the time. And I needed to adapt. And also around that age, girls are a thing. So I don't remember what was happening on the day that I started drinking, but I was about 11 years old. I remember coming home from school being super upset about whatever was happening, whether it was the change or whether it was a girl. I don't know, but I remember I would have family, whether it was my dad, whether it was my mom's boyfriend coming home and saying, "Hey, I had a really tough day. I'm just gonna have a drink." So I was like, "Hey, if it helps them have a better day, then I could have a better day too." So I went in, I grabbed my mom's rum and went back in my room, and I took a sip of it and I was like, "Oh, this is nasty. I can't stand it. I don't want it." And I put it back. And then I came back and I was just hard on myself and I was beating myself up. And I was like, "You're such a whatever." I was calling I was like, you can't even take that. You can't even have alcohol and everyone else has alcohol." So I kept beating myself up and I was like, "Chris, you got to try it." So I went back, I grabbed the rum, came back in my room and I turned it upside down. I chugged as much as I could. And then a couple of seconds later, I felt great. And I was like, totally get it, and fell in love. And so that became my medication. As I was preparing for school, as I was going through whatever I needed to get through, I remember I was developing a tolerance. I got up to 8 shots before I went to school. And then when I got to school, the alcohol led to more things. And the friends that I was hanging out with were doing alcohol and drugs, and they would give me more at school. I had a friend that was addicted to heroin and also had some pain pills. So he would bring in the pain pills. I'd have more friends that would bring in alcohol. So it would just compound it at school. So you asked about my childhood, but anyways, that started off the path. It was these change in different schools. It was a adjustment problem that I had, and then using alcohol to be able to be that social lubricant, if you will, could get
Yeah.
along with people, develop the new identity. So there was a lot that came with alcohol and drugs from a young age.
Do you think you were suffering from like social anxiety and stuff like that you were trying to numb at that time? Like, what do you
Yeah,
think it was?
the weird thing is I never thought that I had a problem with that, just associating with other people as a kid because I knew everybody and I developed that community as a young kid in elementary school. But then changing to this new school, just knowing what we know about stages of life, the teen years are those times, the preteen and teen years are the time where it's most important to develop that community with other people, to socialize, to get out there and make friends and to develop your identity. So the fact that I was drinking, I don't think numbed anything social anxiety wise at the time. But now, to this day, as time went by, I missed out on that opportunity to socialize and develop those skills as a teenager. So it became that as I got into college, got into my young 20s. That's how I used it, with social anxiety, self medication.
Okay. So did being around like your parents and noticing like the rum and all that, did you feel like you were around grew up with people that had a problem with alcohol themselves? Or you think it was just something that appealed to you just watching it around you?
I knew that my dad did. My dad was an alcoholic and he had carried that on from when I was a young age until he passed. So it was a really long duration that I knew that alcohol was an issue. My mom, not so much. I think my mom would drink every now and then. I would never define her as an alcoholic. She has her own, mental health things that she has going on, but it's different from addiction. And then I have a lot of addiction in my family that goes back, but the immediate things that I was witnessing as a child was my dad and his addiction.
Oh, okay. So you said you could drink like 8 shots at one point before even going to school, and
Yeah.
so you already developed a tolerance like even before going into high school, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was huge. It was all in middle school, and it was right before I would go to school. It was like I would build up whatever level of drunkenness that I wanted or needed, and then when I would get into school, I would kind of babysit it and maintain the high or the drunk throughout the day. So yeah, big tolerance before getting into high school, and then high school. Uh, I would say high school was more focused on drugs because I had a lot of friends that had easy access to things, whether it's benzos or painkillers, and that was what hit hardest.
What going into high school? What was your first experience with drugs? I mean, I know typically people start off with marijuana and stuff, but what was like the first like real experience getting high and being like, "This is something I really want to enjoy," and you kept doing it?
Yeah, marijuana wasn't really a thing that ever caught on too much with me. I would do it recreationally with friends, and it wasn't an enjoyment. I would need to drink in order to enjoy the marijuana because if I ever smoked, it would make me think too much. I would just get
Yeah.
too hyper analytical and get in my head. So the things that really got me out of my body were opiates. So the first time I got introduced to drugs, I think that was like, marijuana had its part, but it didn't grab a grip on me. It was more the painkillers. I'd go to school and I'd have that friend again that had easy access to it, and he would just bring pills, and I would feel like it was like a birthday present. I'd have one day, and then the next day he'd have like five, and I'd be like, this, yeah, this is incredible. This is a good day. So it built up from there because I got to experiment with different drugs and just know what was out there, and it got rid of the fear because there's that thought about drugs and this preconceived notions about what they're going to be like, and I just had the roof lifted off. I'm like, well, I got the alcohol in me anyways. Let's give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. Took away all the inhibitions and everything.
Oh yeah.
How was how was the other aspects of school going? How were your grades? Were teachers suspecting things? Were coming home intoxicated? Were your parents starting to ask questions? Like, how was that going with your surroundings?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was crazy when I started drinking. So if you're familiar with Listerine strips, there was Listerine strips back then, and when you put it on your tongue, it had a really heavy flavor of alcohol, or it seemed like you had just taken in Listerine, you had just mouthwashed. So the time that I'm thinking of in particular, when I had the most amount that I could remember before school, my mom called me out in the car. She said, "Have you been drinking?" And I was young. I was like 11. I was like, "Mom, you're crazy." I was like, "I just put in a Listerine strip," and I was bold and I blew it in her mouth and I said, "You can smell it." She goes, "Yeah, I guess it is the Listerine strip." So there was some suspicion beforehand, but she had a lot of trust in me too that I took advantage of. And then at school, I feel like all my teachers knew. All my teachers knew that I was drinking, but I also used a lot of my personality to be able to relate to the teachers and be charismatic and talk it up with them. And there was some way I thought that I could just get away with it. And I would see them before class, I would see them after class, I would apologize if I did anything that was embarrassing to me or if I messed up something in the classroom. I knew that if I was reflective and I could actually tell them a sincere apology, that I could continue doing whatever it is that I was doing,
So
and that
kind of
worked well.
manipulating the situation a little.
Yeah, yeah, completely manipulative. So you asked about how that led to where I am now, like what did childhood leave? And that's one of my big passions is having a united front and a communication method across all the different departments. So similarly to how I was in school and how none of my teachers communicated with the dean, none of the teachers or the dean communicated with my parents. If anyone at the time were to be a united front and come together and attempt to stop me, I think I would have felt really cared for. I would have been pissed. I wouldn't have shown that on the surface, but I would have felt cared for and really happy that someone took me out of this dark place that I was in to be able to put me on a better path. So that's what I do now is make sure that our departments are aligned, and when that patient comes in that was similar to me, I put up that united front and I say, we're not going to allow that. And it's not because I don't care about you. It's not because I don't want to see you successful. It's the opposite. I want to make sure that your treatment's a good experience, and I want to make sure that you're on the path of sobriety. A lot of what I went through and a lot of my leadership style is treating what I know about what I went through and the flaws in the system that lead to continued use.
Okay. Yeah. No, I want to hear more about that too, about how you're helping people now. But how did, just kind of going on a timeline here, how did that progress, say, into high school? How did your drug use? Did you ever like get to the point where you were going through withdrawals and felt like you had to quit early on? Or did you just kind of continue and have a tolerance for it and it wasn't really like impacting your life enough to quit early on?
Yeah, there was a lot that was happening in the early part of the day, and that kept me in my head. That kept me from the withdrawals. I was able to take care of myself through the rest of the day to the point that when the next day came up, I was ready for it because I knew if I came home drunk and high, that's when the suspicion would come in and that's when everything comes to a stop because then my mom would remove the alcohol from the home. I had to strategically play it so that I could continue the use. So I would say that one thing that sticks out majorly in my mind is in my freshman year of high school, when I was taking my finals, I already knew that I was going to do well in a lot of my finals, or I knew that I studied as much as I could. So if I was super high, it wouldn't make a difference. So I had like a PE, physical education final. And in that class, I was with my friend, the friend that I told you about, and his friend was on methadone. So there's these little wafers back then. I think there were 40 milligram wafers or something of methadone. And I was like, let's snort some methadone this morning. So we got the methadones, crumbled them up. I snorted those, and I was on the top floor of the bleachers finishing up my PE final, and nothing really hit me until I stood up. So
Yeah.
I stood up from my final and I was stumbling down. I fell down the bleacher stairs as I was going to hand in my final. Luckily, I got to blame that on like I'm on bleachers, falling happens. But my friends knew I was high and they came down and they helped me walk because I don't know how much methadone I had, but whatever amount of opiates in my system, I couldn't walk and I needed to get to the bathroom, finish up my test. I turned that in. And then on the way to the next final, it was whatever math was in about that time or whatever it was, I can't remember. But I remember going to class and being lost on the way to class for my final. So I couldn't find where the classroom was. And then by the time I got in for the final, I told the teacher, I said, I have an emergency and I need to use the bathroom. And she said, Chris, it's time right now. It's time for the test. And I go, it's an emergency. I really need to go. And she wouldn't let me go. She said, you need to finish the test here. You had because they extended the time between classes because it was finals. There's like, you already had 20 minutes. You could have addressed whatever you needed to address. You need to take this final. So I was in there and I'm just tripping the entire time, just in my chair. I'm rocking back and forth. Anyways, so you asked about how it addressed my grades, and I would say that the finals for that time went extremely down the tubes. I managed to maintain pretty regularly until my senior year. My senior year, they took a big dip. Luckily, I was still able to get into college, but I managed what I needed to and what I felt was the best I could do, like the top of the top, managing it with whatever use that I was doing. So, I could have done much better, but I was like, I want to enjoy my high school life and I want to use with my friends. So this is the balance that I'm striking.
And it sounds like you're still able to remain functional throughout it and still get it into school and all that. So it was like that part of the reason you didn't feel the need to quit or slow down is because you were still multitasking, getting everything done
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what would have kept it going is, if I were to take a dip in a place that I felt like was extremely important in my life, then maybe it would have been a call to action. But I never had that. I was able to manage. I was able to get the grades that I felt were acceptable. I could still see a future with my grades while I was using. So everything was maintained and nothing really kicked that into me to be able to say, hey, you need to flip it until that experience in college when I had those back-to-back experiences and everyone around me is pretty much like, you got to stop. Otherwise, we can't be friends.
Okay. So yeah, what take me into college and you already seemed like a pretty seasoned veteran by that time, starting so young and then consistently doing it through middle school and high school. So like going into college, was it much different being exposed to like the more acceptable drinking, at that age, or how did that transpire?
It was the difference in college was that I started blacking out. I never blacked out before I would continue the use, and I felt like it was enough to maintain a buzz throughout the day or the high throughout the day. But when I was in college, there were access to many different liquors, and I found a certain recipe to be able to black out. I took pride. It was like an identity for me to be the drunk one. So I would do whatever I needed to black out that night, and then I would be surprised the next morning by whoever was around me, and they would say, "Hey, Chris, you did this last night," and I would say, "Oh, that's insane. Tell me more," because I have no idea what happened, and then they would tell me the rest of the story. And again, I took pride in it. It was like I was the drunk one, which is a pretty crazy crown to have considering all of the people in college, and that's the time that everyone's getting drunk.
Yeah,
So
but you're the one with nicknames and a reputation and all that. Yeah.
yeah, I knew that it was a problem, and it would stick out because, when 2, 3 in the morning rolled around and there was no one else awake, and I'm going around drinking everyone else's drinks because I either don't want it to be wasted or wasted, whatever. It's a party foul to leave drinks out, so I'd drink all the rest of their drinks, and I'd be the only one up. And people would wake up and be like, "Chris, what are you doing?" And it would be like a weird feeling, like I had to hide it.
Yeah.
But then I also had the reputation, so I could also own it and be okay with it. Be like, "Hey, I'm still drinking, man. Go back to sleep. It's all good."
Yeah, no, I've been there, like, in college looking back at it, I didn't really drink much in high school. Just like, I could count how many times I actually drank before college, but once I got there, it was like almost a goal for me to be the blacked out one. Like, I'm not drinking to have fun anymore. I'm drinking to see how messed up I can get. That way people have something to tell me the next day, and it's like once that reputation kind of sets in and the years go by and you look back at it now, and it's like, wow, I was the one who clearly had a problem. I just didn't recognize it because we were in school and people kind of joked about it. But I had more of a problem than anybody else, it seemed like, because I was up drinking the wounded soldiers, in the middle of the night, and other people were passed out, like responsible people. And I was the one who was still drinking, or I was waking up and the first one to crack open a beer the next morning, and like that. And I thought that was cool, but it's like, no, that's a sign of alcoholism, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was it. It was like the hair of the dog. It was like, when the next morning afterwards, if I had a hangover, then I'd start drinking again and be able to excuse it because I'd be able to say, "Well, I got a hangover. I got to get rid of it. This is just
Yeah,
what you do." So
exactly.
yeah, it was weird that I was, that isolated one, like, I was put out there like that, but it was me putting myself out there like that. I'm not the victim of anything, but I put myself out there like that. And then at the same time, there came to a point where even those people that I was surrounded by that were also drinking were like, this is too much. And that was the point that it's like, this is no longer fun. Even though it was my identity, even though the identity was reinforced and it seemed like everyone around me was having fun telling me the stories and engaging with me, there was something that was also not fun about it. And people saw the damage that it was doing.
Exactly, exactly. So can you think of any like specific memories to where like you woke up the next day or whatever and somebody told you something that happened or something you recall happening that started to kind of wake you up to the point where you're like, maybe I have a real problem, like not just being approached by somebody saying, "Hey, Chris, you're taking it too far," but like did anything specific take place?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, anything that was criminal would really wake me up. Because so, like the wake up call that I had around the 21st birthday when I got arrested, put on academic probation and all these things that were really bright lights from the school, like the dean pulled me to talk to me. I had to do a DUI class. The things that affected my legal status, whether or not I'm having a record or whether or not I was continuing in school really affected me. And that happened to me a couple times. The fight that I got into, for example, when that happened, it was a little bit later that the guy that was with me at the time, he committed suicide. So there was like people around me that were struggling, and it was because of crimes that I was committing and I wasn't being caught for. So instead of someone saying it in a crowd and someone saying it to me privately, those were the conversations where it's like, this is a wake up call. Because
Kind of set in.
if I had 5 people around me and they were like, "Dude, Chris, you're crazy. You threw this honey bottle at this person and it woke them up," and all this kind of stuff. It's like, oh, everyone laughs. "Chris, you're such a douchebag." And then at other times, someone would be like, "Hey, Chris, like let's chat real quick, man. Like let's hop to my bedroom," and be like, "Chris, dude, do you realize that you did this to that person yesterday?" And I'd be
Yeah.
like, "Damn." And that hit me heavy. And I was like, "Ooh, like that's tough." Like I can't even apologize for that because if I apologize, I'm owning it and I'm getting arrested. Like all these crazy thoughts were going through my head.
Yeah.
Those are the things that were wake up calls. It's like when you need to speak to me privately about the things that I'm doing, because it's no longer a reputation thing. It's actually something that's going against being the fun drunk guy. It's like, no, you're not the fun drunk guy anymore. You're the guy that's doing the things that are dark and not so good.
Yeah, you're scaring people and making
Yeah.
people question their friendship, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, no, I've been there before. There were times where I woke up with like blood on my hands or something, and I was like petrified, and then I would be sending out a message and stuff like I'm like, what happened? They're like, oh, nothing. You tried to punch somebody, but you ended up eating crap and face planting on the ground or something. And I'm like, still, but what the heck was I doing? Why was I doing that? Like why was I even at that point? And that doesn't even sound like fun anymore, And it's those things start to become wake up calls. The more you like start to realize, wow, I could have gotten into a lot of trouble,
Yep.
or like what could have happened. So it sounds like you got a DUI or two then in college then.
So before we go on, we lived a very similar life. It sounds like
Yeah.
everything that you're describing. I'm like, man, that sounds so
Yeah.
familiar to me.
Yeah.
So the DUI class was this general. It was a general alcohol education class for anything that's like a drug or alcohol crime that's committed on campus. Because the fight that I got into was on the UNLV campus in Las Vegas. So it was a DUI class. I never got charged with the DUI, but it was just a part of the course that they made me go to.
Oh, okay. Got
Plenty of
it. Okay.
DUIs just didn't get caught for them.
Okay, so it sounds like there were some wake up calls in college and stuff. So getting out of college, for me, that's when the drinking went from partying hard to drinking alone and turning into like legitimate what people would call alcoholism. Like, how did that work for you going into like the real world out of college and like still having that, it sounds like you'd been partying for like 10, 12 years at that point. Like, how did that start to progress for you?
Yeah, it wasn't a bad transition. It was like a on and off transition. So when I had that wake up call and I stopped doing drugs and I stopped blacking out regularly, my second, third, and fourth year of college went pretty well. I was pretty focused. I needed to get through what I needed to get through. I had a couple slip ups here and there. Slip ups meaning like I was heavily using drugs up to the point that weekend of 21, I stopped everything. But the slip up would be like I would go to a friend's house and steal some of his cocaine and use it for whatever reason. And and then there would be some other times where I would have a blackout, not meaning to black out. And I've had some times where I was talking to my dad or my family and just be like, I'm not drinking just for the best for me. I can't do it because I know that when I do it, it gets out of hand. So there was a lot of testing that I did, and then he eventually came to the point that it was no longer this big issue that was hanging over my head. It was like I had a support system and I had people around me and I had a future to look at where I didn't want to escape from it. I didn't have this trauma over my head of people that are telling me the things that I'm doing wrong, the trauma that had lived in my past and typically hangs over your head over years. The people that were feeding into that validation of using weren't around anymore. So when I extracted all that from my life and created this life worth living, I didn't have the desire to drink until blackout.
Okay.
And it was really weird because all throughout when I was drinking or when I had issues or even becoming a young drug and alcohol counselor, I would ask these questions or I'd be asked these questions, but I never internalized it. So one question that comes up, and you've probably heard it, is did you ever drink more than you planned to drink?
Yeah.
And I was like, planned to drink. I asked myself that one day. I was like,
Who plans it?
who the hell plans how much they're going to drink? Yeah, I was like, when I start drinking, I'm like, I'm drinking until it doesn't feel good anymore. Like I'm drinking until I black out. I'm drinking until, but there are people that are in the world that are like, hey, this is an important event. Maybe I shouldn't have 5 drinks tonight. Hey, I'm going to be around some important people. Maybe I shouldn't be dead ass drunk.
I
And
always admired people with that kind of control.
yeah, I was like, I never knew that people asked that question, but apparently it is a question that people asked.
Yeah. No,
So
people that
I never
have
knew.
one or two or like limit themselves, hey, I'm stopping at 4 or 5 after a good buzz. I'm like, I don't know how you do that. I just until I'm forgetting what I'm saying or whatever, I don't see the point of stopping. So
Yeah, yeah. No, it's like my body tells me to stop. If I'm sleeping or if I'm passed out or if I'm blacked out, that's when I know to stop. So yeah, that question came to me and again over the years when things had changed with my support system and the people that I surrounded myself by and mental health being addressed and all that kind of stuff. it really became apparent that I could ask myself that question, which is really interesting. Like, okay, this is going to be an important event with my families around me, and this is going to be something that I could really look forward to. And we're probably going to be taking pictures. I probably shouldn't have anything to drink tonight, or I probably should have one and limit myself and have like an accountability buddy next to me to be able to say, hey, the one is good. So that built up with time, and it was different because I had a whole mindset that it felt like my brain worked differently in high school and college. And it was the brain chemistry that you and I talked about. You drink until you're drunk, you drink until you're passed out, you drink until you're blacked out. And then there's this other one that's like, hey, you probably shouldn't drink, or hey, you should probably limit yourself. And I never knew that this was a thing. So it was there was a flip that happened there.
Wow. Okay. So when did that flip take place? When you started to actually like learn that it's okay to control it and it's actually beneficial to control it?
You know what? I never told my wife this, but one of the biggest events that meant a lot to me was actually our wedding day. And I remember before our wedding day, we were planning everything and what it was going to look like, and there was going to be like an open bar for a certain amount of time. And I was like, oh man, an open bar. And I was like, my first thought is, man, I can't wait to drink. This is going to be a great wedding. Can't wait to get into it and just enjoy the whole night. And then there were different obligations that I started thinking about. They're like, Chris, you should probably make a speech at this point in time. And it was like right in the middle of the reception. I'm like, how am I going to make a speech if I'm blacked out? So I was like, okay, that's a rough one. And it's like, oh, Chris, we have to plan out your pictures. There's going to be some pictures before and after the wedding. I was like, shoot. I was like, if I'm taking pictures after the wedding, I can't be all unkempt and looking weird.
Yeah.
I should probably tone it back a little bit. And then I started thinking about all the people at the wedding, and it was her family and my family and our close friends. And I'm like, man, this just doesn't seem like a great place to be drunk. It doesn't seem like a great place to be blacked out, even though it's a wedding. And I'm like, I felt like it was a miss. As weird as it sounds, it was like, I'm going to miss the chance to get drunk. But then it was also a huge win. It was like, I don't need it. I don't need the alcohol. I'd rather be participating in these obligations that I have.
Yeah.
So, there was champagne that was put in front of me, and I have some pictures from it back then, but I had some champagne that was put in front of me, and I had like a sip of it, and I was like, you know what, I'm good. Like, I actually feel like really naturally happy right now. I don't need to drink that. And then there was like you select a wine that's in front of you, and I had a wine, and I had a little bit of that just for the appearance of it, and I did it. And then I was like, I don't need that either. Like, I have no desire to continue the drinking. And it really reminded me of like Rat Park. If you know that story, Johan Hari talks about it, where it's the cocaine water and the rat. Have you heard this story before?
No, I haven't. No, I'm interested.
Yeah. So the rat goes into a cage. They do this experiment and they put cocaine in the water, and then they have a second choice where they can drink regular water. So the rat goes in the cage, and 9 times out of 10 it drinks the cocaine water. And then they look at the experiment and they're saying, well, duh, the rat's going to drink the cocaine water. He has nothing else to do. There's nothing in here. He's trapped in a cage. There's nothing to play with. There's no people around. Of course, he's going to drink the cocaine water. So then they do a second test. And with the second test, there's all kinds of fun stuff. They call it Rat Park. So there's things to play on. There's people to get along with. There's partners, whatever the case is. And he's surrounded by fun people, fun animals. Other mice, another mouse, maybe it was. But anyways, so it's Rat Park. And what they found was the rat wasn't selecting the cocaine water as often.
Interesting. Because he had so many other positive distractions around him.
Yeah, it was drinking the regular water. And then the cocaine water, I think, he might have done it recreationally, like tried it out once or, twice or whatever the case is. But it was massively different than when he's in a cage. So that really reminds me of the comparison of Rat Park. It was like, okay, I'm choosing the alcohol water. I'm choosing the opiate water. I'm choosing the meth water because I don't like my life. I feel like I'm trapped in a cage. I don't like the people that I'm around. I've established this image of I'm expected to drink. I'm expected to use. So I'm going to use. It's this brain chemistry that's walked down so many different times on these pathways that it's like, this is me. And then I have this park put in front of me where I have my partner, where I have a family, where I have things to look forward to in my life. And I'm like, I choose the park. I don't want to choose that water anymore. I want to choose the park. So I get the park and a little bit of water. So that's my experience with it. I think that there's, it's anyways, I'll stop on that. I could keep going, but that's a really powerful message.
Oh, that's great. And it's cool that on one of the most important days for you and your wife's life, that's when you came to that realization that it's like, hey, I don't need this. I can be present. I can be present for all the important people that are here right now, and I don't need to distract myself or numb myself for that reason. So that was kind of the start of kind of changing your outlook on how you chose to drink and how much you would drink.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I've seen addiction on a spectrum, completely. And that's why it's really difficult to talk about these kinds of things, because in no way do I want to say that moderation is a route, because I don't say that I was an addict. I say that I was caught up with a million different addictive behaviors, and I was going through a really struggling time in my life for a whole decade. And then I've created this rat park to the point that I drank and I really didn't want to black out drunk. But there are so many cases where I've been in treatment, I see someone that has built a rat park and they have no desire to drink or use drugs, but then they have a relapse when they go through a tough time in their life and they end up drinking or using until they're homeless. There was a phrase out in Vegas when I was living there, and it was like, yeah, some people can drink and black out and just be okay the next day and continue with their life, a normie. And then some people drink until they're homeless. And there's a real different variation on the addiction spectrum. So it's like,
Yeah.
for those people that have so many things to risk and their life goes down the shitter when it happens, hell no, it's not an option. Like, abstinence is the way to go. So it's a really interesting dichotomy that we need to narrow down into a spectrum instead of a dichotomy.
Yeah, because when I hear about people that can go from out of control drinking and then be able to moderate it at some point in their life and just get it under control and still function, I feel like, those people are an anomaly. It's like, how
Exactly.
the heck is that possible? Because I tried that a million times where I tried to, okay, I'm going to quit for 30 days and then I'll just drink slowly after that. Just prove to myself I could do 30 days. But then, that one drink that I have after 30 days would turn into a 2.5 month bender where I'd end up in the hospital and lose everything. So
Exactly.
it's like, but there's people that can do that and be like, okay, I'm only drinking on weekends now. And they just continue through life and it's fine. And as soon as it turns into a problem, they know how to slow down. And it's like, it's not everybody, but there are people that can do it. And I admire that. But you're right. There's the different, just different areas on the spectrum of addiction.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's on a wide spectrum, and there's so many things that it's like, if I'm a big odds person, and if you're weighing the risk, and if so many times it's ended up like, do you really want to gamble with a hospitalization again? Do you really want to gamble with the fact that you could be arrested again? Do you want to gamble with the fact that you ended up homeless last time? It's like, you could gamble, the odds aren't in your favor, and
Yep.
you don't want to take that risk.
The house always wins.
Yeah, that's right. Good way to put it. Yep.
Yeah. Um, so how did you in turn end up getting into the career that you're in now? How did you start?
Yeah, I was a secondary education major, which means from 6th grade to 12th grade would be the teaching age that I was looking at. It narrows in on that part. And I wanted to be a 7th grade teacher, and I wanted to teach English. So ironically, my big major drinking habit started off in 6th grade, and then it carried on throughout that. It was really interesting because I never really made the correlation, but 7th grade, in my head, I was like, I really want to hear these kids' stories. I told myself that it would be so interesting to be in an English class where they're writing essays, and my whole job is to review these stories of what they're talking about, whatever's in their imagination or whatever's in the stories of their life, and I could help them through that as a teacher. When it came down to picking the classes that I needed to pick, when I narrowed in on the English part of that, being a teacher, all of the classes had to do with English literature, so like Shakespeare, and I have terrible reading comprehension. If I'm not interested in what I'm reading, then I can't understand it. I just don't want to participate in it. So I'm like, I'm going to fail all these classes, and I don't want to fail. So I talked with my counselor at school, and they said, you know what, you like hearing people's stories, you like helping them through that. And I know you've said that you want to be a psychologist, but the career path is just too long, or the education path. It's like, if you want to do counseling right away, you can get into substance use counseling. It only requires a bachelor's degree. After you get your bachelor's degree, you can be a KDAC. And when you're a KDAC, you can start counseling immediately. I said, that's incredible. I would love to be a counselor and do pretty much the same thing that I'd be doing in a classroom, but do on an individual basis. So I took that route and got a passion in each section. Did my minor in addiction treatment. I did another minor in family studies because I loved the idea of the family system. You know, all of that led me down the path of the substance use counselor. I started off as a substance use counselor when I graduated from college, and then I branched out to a couple different things within the helping profession. Like I worked for Child Protective Services, I worked with foster kiddos on behavioral modification. I
Yeah,
did
like social
couples
work and
therapy.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, all kinds of things. So I branched out a lot, and then the calling kept bringing me back here to substance use counseling. So it's
Wow.
full circle. Yeah.
How much do you think of that becoming a substance use counselor and what you're doing now? How much do you think that stems from your history, your personal history with it?
I would say that it has to be near 100%.
Okay.
Just thinking about what I've been through and the way that I talk to the patients and the way that I create systems that impact patients positively, so much of it is based on my own lived experience to be able to say, this is what I need. This is what didn't work. This is how I manipulated the system. This is how we're going to prevent manipulation. This is how I appreciate a leader at the time. This is how I appreciate a parent. This is how I appreciate someone that I look up to. I'm going to make sure that the system that we're providing is that the leadership, the parenting method, whatever the case is. But that's how I run leadership. So a lot of it traces back to it,
Wow.
back to that lived experience.
So you worked as a chief clinical officer at a 181 bed facility in Vegas. Was that kind of that's precursor to what you're doing now, to how you ended up in this position now? That was kind of
Yeah,
what got you into the career.
yeah. My career escalated really quickly. Like after being a therapist, I started running groups at that facility. I ran the whole PHP program and did group therapy, and I had the desire to move up. And eventually, I got off to low battery. Eventually, I got up to being a clinical director. Expressed my interest in it, and my clinical director at the time left shortly after I expressed that interest, not because of anything that I was doing or he was doing. He just had, I think he actually moved out of the state, but it opened up that door for me to be clinical director. And as I was in that role, I was coaching up others to be leaders. I promoted one person to be a clinical director, and I took over chief clinical officer because our chief clinical officer moved into a consultant role. So there were so many things that happened back to back that allowed me to step into that position. And a lot of it was the big picture thinking. How are we running the system? What's our vision for the program? What's our strategic planning look like? So, as you said, it was a precursor to the things that I'm doing now. The strategic planning is something that is a big part of my role now. The clinical foresight and everything that I'm using with that are also a big part.
Cool. So what does like a 24-hour day look like now in your position that you're working in now at the Laguna Treatment Center? Like, what do you still work directly with people that come in to reside there, or how does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of my role is in the administrative side, and very little of it is the direct practice with the patients, whether that be therapy or assessments or anything along those lines. But the thing that I really enjoy doing is being on the front lines for crisis intervention. So if there's anything that's happening, whether it's a fight, which obviously that happens extremely rarely, I might have seen or heard of one since I've been here in the past 3 years, or if there's allegations of someone using on site, the really big major issues I like to be involved with and be the person that's face to face with the person that's having
Yeah.
the issue.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good role model for the people that are around me to be able to say, "Hey, I've been here. I do this, and I'll be on the front with you to be able to address the really difficult situations, and then coach the people that are around me to do it. So if I'm ever offsite or unavailable, they know how to step in for those similar situations." To
Okay.
answer your
Yeah.
question, very little direct contact, mostly administrative.
But you get hands on when it's necessary, and
Absolutely.
also to coach other people working with you too. So that's good. So a question I have, which I think is a good one for you, just being that you were able to manage your drinking and addictions later in life, and now you work with a lot of people in addiction. Do you think there's a huge difference into people that are that have a chemical imbalance and addiction to alcohol and drugs, the ones that can't quit on their own, and there's the people like yourself who can actually learn how to quit on their own and moderate? Is there a huge difference there?
Yeah, I would say, just as you said before, I think it's a perfect word for it, is anomaly. It's like if there are so many millions and millions of people that are struggling with addiction, and then I stick out and there might be a couple other that stick out, it's like there's nothing that's for sure within human nature, and that's the anomaly. So I would never preach that as a method or say that it's something to go down. I would say that I'm the anomaly, and I would say that the family and support really dictated the outcome, but it didn't make it happen. So and all of that thought, what's the brain process look like? What's the biochemistry look like? I would say don't play with fire. Don't look for the anomaly. Don't say, "Hey, I'm special in this kind of way," because that's a part of the disease talking too. That's a part of me saying, "Hey, maybe I'm this anomaly." And even though you struggled and you keep getting arrested, you keep getting hospitalized, you keep blacking out and affecting your whole family. That's not what you want to strive for. Is let me test that again. That's not what we're looking for. So as far as biochemistry and what happens and what makes a situation like me different from someone that comes through the program, I would say that, like you said, it's an anomaly, super rarity.
Yeah, I get it. So I feel like what you do is obviously extremely rewarding. Do you feel like working in your line of work actually helps you in your own recovery to stay focused, stay on the right path so that you're in the right mindset to be able to help others? Does that keep you sober or like keep you on the right track?
Yeah. Are you talking about just my daily practices? Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I have the same structure every single day, so there's not too much chaos thrown into it unless I want some chaos. Start off with exercising first thing in the morning, and when I get to work, I have a certain structure of the day where I get reports out to my team. Everyone knows what they're up to. We have good communication across the board, and the way the rest of the day lays out, it's a lot of outreach, a lot of leadership coordination, a lot of managing the things that can't be managed by on-site staff or by direct service staff. And when I'm closing out the day, and when I'm going home, spend some great time with my daughter and my wife and get to sleep at a pretty typical time every day. Really close with my church community right now. Try to get involved with my daughter's daycare. And then on the weekends, go to Disneyland and every now and then go to the beach. So there's like a very routine schedule to it. And it's like once one of those things or a couple of those things start getting off track, I can feel that my life starts going towards an unhealthy, not so productive way. So like if I start cutting out that exercise in the morning, my life is going to start looking really rough. It's
Yeah.
going to start getting weird. And if I start cutting off the morning routine of me getting the reports out to my team and communicating across the leadership departments, my life's going to start looking really rough. There's these things that I create structure in my day and the community that I've created that I know that that's what upholds me. It's like this foundation. It's like I built it up to here. And it's like if I fall, the foundation will catch me because I have these rituals that I do every single day. But if I take out those rituals or if I change something different, that fall is going to be so much harder. So
Yeah.
absolutely my daily practices help to hold that up, the structure.
That's good. That already answered my next question was like ways that you stay consistent and stay on the right track and all that. And exercise is one of the biggest ones that I emphasize on. We say in like the AA program, resting on your laurels, as soon as you kind of like get comfortable and you cut out one thing that you think, oh, I can live without that, that's when like, your whole entire system starts to get messed up. And that's where you start to go back to old ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's,
No,
that's good.
absolutely. I had a friend that was in Las Vegas and he was talking with one of his sponsees and the sponsee came to him and said, you know what? He was doing 90 and 90 or something like that. And he goes, I don't have time. I don't have time for a meeting today. I'm going to do something else. And the sponsor said to him, he goes, then you need to do 2 meetings. And I was like, at the time I didn't get it, but he explained it out and he was like, if you don't have time for the one meeting, you're at risk of relapse. You're already putting your recovery to the side. So you need to ramp up your meetings because you're starting to put your priorities in the wrong places.
Such
So
a good point.
I loved that method because that's the same thing. I'm thinking if I start thinking, hey, maybe I shouldn't exercise today, it's like, Chris, wake your ass up and make sure to work out extra hard because your mind is getting in some weird places. So do the
Exactly.
things that you know work.
Yeah, exactly. Because once you just get too comfortable, that's when your mind starts to wander and you start to justify other things that used to possibly be toxic and lead you down that bad path. So I totally get it. And I catch myself getting to that point every now and again where I start to slow down going to meetings or I start to say, hey, I can go to the gym 4 days this week instead of five when I'm very OCD about getting 5 days in, And that's when I start to worry about myself and I start to slip up on other things like communication and all these things. So it's we have
Yeah.
to have a structured environment to stay focused. So
Yeah, yeah, no,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, once you start compromising your values and your structure, what else are you going to compromise?
Exactly. Exactly. So, what, couple last questions. What advice would you give to somebody out there right now struggling or that's sober curious or just new to recovery? What advice would you give based on your experience, what you do in your career, what your relationship with working with addicts these days? What advice would you give?
Yeah, there's something that comes up like in the DAST and the MAST and in the different assessments to be able to say, hey, do I have a problem with the drugs or alcohol? And one of the biggest questions to ask yourself and consider for anyone else to talk to is, has anyone ever said that you have a problem or that you may have a problem with drinking or using? And to yourself, have you ever personally asked that question? Because on a typical basis and a normie, that question doesn't really come up. That doesn't cross your mind. So to be able to ask that question and say, hey, maybe I have a problem with drinking or drugging, then I would say reach out to somebody, reach out to a counselor, reach out to someone that you care about and talk further about it, because that's the first step. And a lot of the people that come through our doors, they're pre-contemplative. And in the stages of change, what that means is they think that there is no problem. So you're in good company. If you're thinking, hey, drugs and alcohol aren't so much of a problem, or I really don't know if it's a problem, what you're saying is completely normal to experience and to think about, because other people are in your same exact shoes here. And it's not your responsibility to move into the place that you're taking action or making a change in your life. That's up to the professionals.
Yeah.
And they'll help you along that path.
No, very well said. No, exactly. And people, that's the thing, is people are hesitant and afraid to ask for that help. And when I was asked those questions going into treatment 18 months ago, my 18-month sobriety is tomorrow, actually. So
congrats, man.
18 months ago, I was entering a facility, and I was still in denial that I needed the help. It took me 10 days to finally hit me where I'm like, okay, I belong here. But those first 10 days, I was just kind of trying to battle what things, how many reminders, how many times people brought up, hey, you might need help. And I looked back, and it started when I was 21, and I was shaking, drinking my first beer at 3 p.m. or something like that. And somebody said, hey, you might be drinking too much because you're shaking right now while you're having your first drink. And I'm like, I never thought of it. I was just like, oh no, I probably just took too much creatine or something. I don't know. But no, my alcohol problems had already begun, and I chose to ignore them for another 14 years. So it's so the reminders are there, and I knew I had a problem subconsciously, but I never asked for help. So I really appreciate what you do now to help people and help people in that environment and change their lives around. So I'm grateful for you being on today, sharing your story. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, likewise. I appreciate you having this podcast. I think you're making a big difference for people. So thank you too.
Thank you. Yes, just trying to give people a platform to share their stories on, and whether it's, I've had people on that still can drink in moderation, which I admire. And I encourage people that still drink or are able to use recreationally to even come on and share their stories, because it's everybody has a different path. Some people can handle it differently than others. Some people have traumas that they've been numbing. So it's just, I like a little bit of everything on the show, and I feel like everybody has a story to share, regardless of what path we took.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's on a spectrum, and it's good that you're exposing the spectrum. You're not just pointing to one perspective.
Yeah. Is there I like to ask my guests, do you have a quote that you live by, or a quote that stands out, like a motivational type quote that you like?
Motivational type quote?
Yeah, I do like the story about the rat. That was really cool, but I was just curious if you had a specific quote that you live.
Yeah, the Rat Pack was really a cool story. I think the biggest guiding star, I can't think of a quote right now. There was one, and it was big when I was a couples counselor, and I think it applies to addiction, especially with us knowing now that connection is the opposite of addiction. But the quality of the relationships in your life is the quality of your life. And I probably just tore up the quote, but that's how it sticks in my mind. And if I'm managing my relationships well, that really dictates how my life is going. When my relationships are down the tubes, then my life isn't going well. So just knowing that to you dictates the quality of your life.
Yeah, well, that's perfectly said. Thank you so much.
And of course.
And I agree with that quote. Somebody else on a recent episode said something like, we are the 5 people that are closest to us, or something like that. And it was we are like a reflection of those 5 people. And I started thinking about the 5 people that I spend the most time with. And I'm like, yeah, it's I don't know if that's completely the same, but it's just, I think I kind of relate who I am and how I'm doing in life to the connections I'm making.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one. Well, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate you being on, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Take it easy.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.